After decades of being stuck in development hell, delays, and PR nightmares, The Flash finally rushes into theaters this weekend. So let's talk about it. My name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your thoughts on The Flash. This is a spoiler-free review. I will do my absolute best not to mention anything that has not already been revealed in the trailers that have been released up to this point in time. But if you want to know as little as possible going into the movie, but want to know my recommendation or something else, I'll put chapter markers down below so you can skip ahead to specific subjects. With that said, let's get started with the good. So going into this year, this was one of my most anticipated films of the year. And then when they dropped the first full trailer, I loved it. And it might have shot up to my most anticipated film of the year. I loved everything that trailer was teasing. It hit all the right notes. And I'm very happy to say that the movie lived up to my anticipation. I kind of loved it. Yes! Little bit of a life point of reference. I'm old enough that I remember when the 1990 Flash TV show came out, I recorded over my mom's VHS copy of Flash Dance with the Flash pilot TV movie, and I used to watch it all the time. So the first ever photo op I ever took at a Comic-Con was with John Wesley Shipp, the Flash from that TV show. So the idea of a Flash movie is something I've been excited about for a very long time. When they said that it was going to be kind of based around the Flashpoint storyline, I loved that because I think Flashpoint is one of the great Flash stories out there. And continuing down that path, they announced Michael Keaton was going to be in the movie as Batman. My journey into nerd fandom started with Batman '89. Over 30 years later, I still have my full collection of trading cards for both Batman and Batman Returns. So this movie has all sorts of things about it that are special, that tie back to my childhood, and it is being pulled from a story that I think is one of the great Flash stories. It had all these ingredients to be awesome. We're looking great. Then there was a couple years of horrible PR nightmare headlines revolving Ezra Miller. And I'll talk about that in the mix section, but for now, why did I love this movie? Well, what I think it does really well is find a story that both has emotional stakes, epic stakes, while earning all the fan service. Of course, the big one there is Michael Keaton returning as Batman, and by choosing to do kind of this Flashpoint storyline where the timeline gets broken and you're seeing all these alternative versions, they find a story that bakes the fan service into the cake. It's right there in the story and it makes sense, while not being just about having a bunch of people appear that it's fun to be like, hey, look who it is. Look, I'm seeing that person again. They have a story that matters outside of that. It's very much a story about Barry Allen, but in a lived-in DC universe that exists within a multiverse. For that reason, it has a lot of emotional resonance. It's about Barry dealing with his childhood trauma that has affected his entire life, and somewhat how that's shared with Batman, someone also with childhood trauma, and while they're very different people, they share that. And so that kind of gives a through line to the story that's kind of being explored and processed. So as much as it has humor and it has fan service and big action, there's always that kind of baseline connected to reality of the pain that shapes us into who we are. That's so important to the film. Now, this movie, of course, will be compared to No Way Home. Both of them are movies that are multiverse, where they're bringing back superheroes of different generations' childhoods. For me, I would easily say that The Flash is the better film. Both of them deliver kind of the fan service, kind of hitting the nostalgia notes, like, wow, it's so cool. I'm getting to see this actor on screen again in that role. But I think that The Flash has the much stronger story, a much better motivator for why the events take place, where there's actually a conflict within our main character, that they're making a choice based off different value sets that sets the story in motion. But I think with The Flash, the story, the themes, the emotion are integrated much better. They flow together. They're all kind of in the same line from beginning to end, what the movie's trying to explore. And so I find it much more compelling on a story level. Intentionally not wanting to go too much into detail because I don't want to spoil anything. But even from what you can see in the trailer about Barry struggling with the powers that he has, all the people he can save, and what he's able to do, but he hasn't been able to save the two people that matter most to him. And that's such a compelling journey of what do you do with that? And the conflicts, the choices that come with it are interesting in a way that No Way Home I thought was a special Spider-Man experience, but the actual setup about him trying to get into college, I don't find all that compelling. I don't find it interesting that him and Doctor Strange didn't pause to discuss the options, whereas this one is built around a great internal struggle for our main character. And say what you will about Ezra Miller in the real world, Ezra Miller is great in this film in both roles as Barry Allen. A great performance does not excuse bad behavior, but also bad behavior does not make for a bad performance in a film. And the performance is emotional, it's funny, it's quirky, it's endearing. For the movie you're watching, it's a great performance. And you can understand why they struggled with not wanting to recast, not wanting to reshoot, because if you watch the movie and you go, it's great, the movie works, this is a great performance, and we have two of a person that is a PR nightmare, what do you do when the movie's already shot and it works and it's really, really good? Of course, you got to talk about Michael Keaton. As someone that grew up watching Batman and Batman Returns on loop, it is so cool to see Michael Keaton back as Batman in a very different phase of life, in a very different Gotham, in a very different DC universe, and finally getting to be in a DC universe with other heroes that he gets to interact with and give guidance to and see how he responds. I mean, it's cool. The theater I was in when Keaton drops the classic lines, even though they're in the trailer that we knew they were coming. When the movie pauses for him to say the lines, my theater burst into applause. They loved it. I can't wait to watch the movie again, opening night, with the opening night crowd, to see how they respond to Michael Keaton in the role again. But it's cool getting him to see him once again. And for me, like, Spider-Man 2002 came out when I was a grown adult, after I'd graduated high school. Keaton was the superhero of my childhood. So seeing him again, that's what's so special and cool for me. I've had some people ask me how much Ben Affleck is in the film, and I would essentially say there's as much as I expected, which is to say you get a little bit of Batman action, you get a little bit of mentor Bruce Wayne. It's not a ton of screen time, but it's important screen time, and it's a little bit more of everything that you want to see from Batfleck. Like I said, it's how many minutes is it? It's not a lot. It's just kind of limited to a section of the film, but you get a little bit more. And the movie definitely starts with a bang of like, oh, this is cool that we're getting to see this in a way that makes you go, oh man, like this is what the DCEU could have been. This is kind of the world that I would have liked to have seen. This kind of right here, more of this. and then immediately we're going to mess with the timeline and we're going to reboot it with James Gunn or whatever, but this movie teases what could have been. As I mentioned earlier, it's loosely based on the Flashpoint storyline, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised how much Flashpoint is in this movie. It's very much its own interpretation of the basic idea. It's very much a DCEU-ified version of Flashpoint, but it hits a lot more of the beats than I was expecting. It's a lot more reminiscent, and if you're familiar with Flashpoint, there's a lot more things that are like, oh, they actually did that. Okay, that's cool. Oh, that's an interesting spin on how to put this idea in the DCEU version of this storyline. It's not a direct translation by any means at all. It's very much pulling its favorite bits and adapting them, but there were more of those bits pulled than I was expecting. But to that point, I also kind of loved the way that it tied into the DCU storyline, the way that it interacts with Man of Steel, the way that it messes with the timeline. I thought it was very clever. I thought that they give some little nuggets about the timeline and how things played out in the Flash's past that I was like, I like that little detail. That's a nice little touch. And it makes the DCU feel more cohesive. It pulls it together just a little bit more, and I appreciated all of that. Another thing, it's really funny. Just like from beginning to end, funny, but I felt like it knew how to be funny and then transition into the somber moments. There's a certain melancholy feel that runs throughout the entire story as you kind of have this tragic backstory for both Barry as well as Bruce Wayne, and you have this very quirky, odd Barry Allen that can be very funny, and there's some wild situations that play out, but then it can slow down at moments to like reflect on what made him the way that he is and have fun with that. And then when we have two Barrys in the story, it provides the opportunity for one of them to kind of be the comic relief while the other one kind of carries the burden of more of kind of what's going on. And I just thought it was handled really nicely, where it's really fun, really funny. It's a blast, but it really does have a lot of weight and emotion because the setup, the arc for Barry is so clear. I should probably talk about Supergirl. She's used in an interesting way. She's not as prominent as Michael Keaton, but the way they integrated various different ideas from Flashpoint as well as the established lore in Man of Steel, it's kind of made for an interesting little mix here. I don't know that there's necessarily enough of her to just like rave about her or anything like that, but I liked the way that she was used and kind of like being a little bit of a spice character in the movie that just kind of added a little bit of something while not distracting from the fact that this is Barry's story. And the final thing you got to talk about is the fan service, and there are more surprises, more little details that they've intentionally held back. In fact, they did a month's worth of screenings for this movie where they didn't even show the end of the film because they were trying to hold some stuff back. And unfortunately, some opportunist accounts on the internet have already started to spoil that stuff, which is infuriating that they're doing that. But avoid the internet, avoid spoilers. There's some great surprises in here, and it's all done subtle enough, small enough, where the story is about Barry with very much a prominent Batman as a secondary character, complementing, mentoring Barry along the way where you get that journey, but with the established lore, the story they're telling, there's opportunities in it for some nice little great moments where like, oh, that was cool they could do that. Oh, that was nice. Oh, this is interesting the way they're pulling all of this together. So for me, I got an emotional multiverse story that delivered some fantastic nostalgia, fan service, while having a Flash story that I thought was an absolute blast. I got what I wanted. But there's more to talk about here, so let's move on to the mixed aspects of the film. And I don't think you can talk about this movie without discussing the Ezra Miller situation, where for all of 2022, it was just a non-stop stream of controversies, scandals, and not like little ones. It was like started like, that's really weird, and escalated to like, what on earth is going on here? And because of that, there's a lot of people that don't want to watch this movie. My wife is very torn. We have tickets to see it Thursday night, and I'm still not sure if she's going to go see the movie with me or not, because she just has a lot of issues with the fact that there were some serious allegations, and Warner Brothers doesn't seem to be bothered by that. Warner Brothers is more concerned with making their money back than dealing with serious allegations. And it's not even that she wanted them to cancel the movie or to reshoot the movie, but to address it, to take serious allegations seriously. And when you have the director saying things like, if we do a sequel, when we do a sequel, we've never even thought about recasting, Ezra Miller is our Flash, it feels like they just don't care about something serious. And I understand a lot of you have big, gigantic issues with that, and I can respect that. If that's the reason that you struggle to watch this movie, I get it. I would counter, and what I'm saying to my wife, a lot of people worked on the movie, and you don't want to punish everyone for one person's bad behavior. But the flip side, and as I think my wife said, the bigger issue for her isn't one person's bad behavior, but a studio that's just not even recognizing that this is a problem, this is a big deal, and you're just shrugging it off. Next thing to talk about in the mix section, your enjoyment of this film greatly depends on the mileage that you get out of the specific fan service. If you have no nostalgia for Michael Keaton, this is going to be a less special film for you. So for me, I said that I think that this is a better movie than No Way Home. No Way Home is special for a lot of people because they grew up watching Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, and then you're watching a movie with all your Spider people together. That's special. If you don't have similar feelings about DC characters of years past, this movie won't have that same specialness for you. I do think it works just on a story level better. It's not as just kind of reliant on the fan service as No Way Home was. I think you could just get invested in Barry's story, the conflict within him, even if you don't care or have never seen Batman 89. It still works because Barry's so front and center with the journey he's on. But I don't think that specialness, whatever that sparkle, nostalgia sparkle, won't be there if you don't have some of the ties to DC of the past the way that someone like I do. I think this movie will be special for a lot of people over the age of 35, and I think people under age 35 or under age 30 or whatever will have a good time with it. They'll think it's fun, but it won't necessarily have that sparkle to it. Another thing I want to talk about here is, while I loved this movie for what it was, I wish that this was The Flash 2. I wish that we got a Flash movie that was smaller in scale, that wasn't so focused on other DC characters, in particular Batman, that wasn't multiverse, that let Ezra Miller be the Flash in Central City, fighting crime, establishing Iris, his relationship with his father, and that tension within him of learning to be a hero while struggling with the fact that he couldn't save the people that mattered most to him. I think this movie would be even better and play better for people that the nostalgia notes won't hit as hard. But just in general, I just wish that we got that, because this movie goes so big and we're going into seeing Man of Steel events and things like that, but we're not getting to see the Flash as the superhero so much in his own city. We're not getting to see a very just Flash-specific story. We're seeing the Flash as the star of a DCEU story. And I wish we could have gotten a first Flash movie that was smaller first. And finally, there is a post-credit scene. It's a couple minutes long. It does have some implications to it. I didn't think it was fantastic. It felt a little bit odd that if you're able to do what you're able to do in this post-credit scene, why would you choose to do this scene of all possible scenes? But there is a post-credit scene in the film that has some significance to it. From there, let's move on to the bad. And the big, gigantic, glaring issue with this film is the CGI. It's not good. Some of it is downright bad. The big stuff that stuck out to me is when they do some of the multiverse time stuff, the way they visualize what's going on the one hand is very interesting and creative. It's like, oh, that's an interesting way to visualize that. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Oh, cool. But also the way it looks like a PlayStation 3 cutscene. It looks like we're watching video game footage from 10 years ago in a movie that cost over $200 million that has been delayed. They were showing this movie to people at test screenings a year ago. And in a year, they haven't polished this up. They haven't found a way to make it look better. For whatever reason. That's not good. But beyond that, even some of the stuff in the fights, the CGI for a movie of this budget isn't good enough. And every review you're going to see for this movie is going to talk about why on earth does the CGI for a movie this expensive look this sloppy. Other thing that comes to mind, they do some stuff kind of as the resolution of the third act that maybe this should go in the mixed section, but it can feel anticlimactic. And with the way that our main villain, where it kind of plays together, it kind of feels rushed. It kind of feels anticlimactic. It feels a little bit odd the way that it plays out. I don't think I minded it. I don't think it was something that bothered me, but I was also a little bit uneasy with it. I'm like, oh, this is what we're doing? Okay. All right. I think I'm on board-ish with this. It's trying to do a story that's very much about what's going on inside of Barry. And so there's all sorts of conflicts that are created when you move into the third act with some of the stuff that they do that you go, okay, that's interesting. It's different. It's a different way to close out your arc and your journey. Treat your villain that's not your classic just big skybeam or whatever, big showdown until a guy's knocked out. It does something very different that I imagine a lot of people will just flat out not like. Like, what with that didn't work for me. I didn't like the villain. I think I got it, but I don't think it's the best way that it could have been handled. I think I like the idea maybe more than the exact execution. Very difficult to talk about without just overtly spoiling the movie as a whole. So in general terms, you'll know what I'm talking about when you get into the third act. And once again, it's tough to discuss this without saying too much. The movie ends on a note that certainly put a smile on my face, got a big reaction from my crowd, but I don't even know what it means for the future of the DCEU, the future of the DCU in light of everything that we know. But it's a choice. It is certainly a choice where they choose to end this film. But in general, it's a movie that even my negatives on it, I don't think detracted from the positive feelings that I felt about the movie.
So we just got out of seeing a promo screening of The Flash, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it from beginning to end. It is wildly entertaining. It's emotional. It has all of the fan service fun stuff that you want in it. And if you're familiar with the Flashpoint graphic novel or the movie, it has a lot more plot beats from it than I was expecting. And so for me, it was everything that I wanted, and I had high expectations, and it lived up to them. What did you guys think of it?
Well, first of all, like as a longtime DC fan, this is just, I couldn't stop smiling throughout the entire movie. And I got really emotional with the third act and all the surprises and everything that went on with the movie. It was just so much fun that I had throughout the movie, and I absolutely loved it.
This movie's just a big love letter to the DC movies in general, and I love this movie so much. It's essentially DC's version of No Way Home, but done a little bit better.
I would agree with that this is like a better version of No Way Home with the plot, the setup, the way that it does everything, the lessons learned by the characters. I loved it. It was everything that I wanted from the movie. So obviously, I highly recommend checking this one out.
you guys should go in the biggest screen that you can because the movie is stunning. So go get your tickets soon if you haven't already.
And avoid spoilers as best that you can. There's so many nice little surprises in here. Our audience was cheering, applauding, going nuts all throughout the entire movie. It was an amazing experience. Go see it.
You say nuts? Let's get nuts.
Real quick before I give you my final thoughts, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know what you thought about The Flash. Also, know I've done a bunch of DC videos in the past, and I'm going to have more over this weekend. But the coolest one I did was a couple years back. I ranked every theatrically released DC film. It was a huge project. It was a ton of fun to watch all 45 of them. You can check that out right up here when this video is over. In the end, when I went into this movie, it was my most anticipated film of the year, and it lived up to my anticipation. I loved the story that was told. It was emotional. It was funny. It had all the nostalgia feels that I wanted. This movie delivered everything that I wanted from a Flash film. Overall, it's an A- on the entertainment scale, a 9.5 out of 10, and this is a must-see for comic book movie fans if you're okay watching a movie starring Ezra Miller. Check out my ranking of all 45 DC films right over there. Come back over the next few days as I'll have more DC content and a Flash spoiler review. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.